You know those nights when everything feels a little too quiet? That was the vibe. It was a Friday evening and I was home alone. My roommate had gone to visit her family for the weekend, leaving me with the place to myself. I wasn't complaining. I had plans. Binge watch a series, eat some takeout, and relax. I decided to order dinner around 7 p.m. There's this burger place I love. Their fries are addictive. So I used the app to place my order. The estimated delivery time was 30 minutes, which gave me just enough time to settle in. I threw on some comfy clothes, grabbed a blanket, and picked a show. Everything felt normal, but that's the thing about normal. It can change in an instant. About 25 minutes later, I got the notification. Your delivery driver is approaching. I glanced at the app. The driver's name was Mike, and his profile picture showed a middle-aged guy with a baseball cap and a friendly smile. Nothing unusual. A few minutes later, my doorbell rang. I got up, grabbed some cash for a tip, and headed to the door. When I opened it, Mike was standing there, holding my bag of food. But he didn't look like his picture. This guy was taller, thinner, and his face was hard to describe. Pale with dark circles under his eyes and a weird, almost twitchy expression. He wore a hoodie pulled up over his head, and his hands were gripping the bag tightly like he didn't want to let go. "Here's your order," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Thanks," I replied, trying to sound casual. I reached for the bag, but he didn't let go right away. Instead, he stared at me, his lips curling into an awkward, unsettling smile. "Nice place," he said, glancing past me into the apartment. My stomach tightened. Thanks." I tried to pull the bag from his hands, and after a moment, he let go. "Have a good night," I said, stepping back and starting to close the door. "You live here alone?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I froze for a split second, then forced a laugh. "Oh no, my roommate's just in the shower," I lied. His smile widened and he nodded slowly. "Good. Wouldn't be safe otherwise." I shut the door and locked it, my heart pounding. "Just a weird guy," I told myself. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. About 10 minutes later, I was halfway through my burger when I thought I heard something. A faint sound, like footsteps on the gravel driveway outside. I paused the TV and listened. Nothing. I shook it off and went back to eating. But then I heard it again, closer this time. My gut told me to check the peephole, so I got up and tiptoed to the door. Peering through, I didn't see anything at first, just the dimly lit porch and the empty street beyond. And then he stepped into view. It was Mike. He was standing on the sidewalk, staring at my door. He wasn't holding any food now, just standing there, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets. I backed away from the door, my heart racing. "What the hell is he doing?" I whispered to myself. Grabbing my phone, I called the delivery app's customer support. While I waited on hold, I checked the peephole again. He was gone. I told myself he'd probably just been waiting for another delivery or maybe checking his phone. Still, I double-checked that all the doors and windows were locked. After a few deep breaths, I tried to relax. The show was still paused on the screen, and my half-eaten burger sat on the coffee table. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a notification or a text from a friend. Instead, it was a message from an unknown number. "Nice place. Really cozy." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. How did he get my number? Delivery drivers didn't have access to that information. My mind raced as I tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence, someone messing with me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I blocked the number and called the non-emergency police line. They told me they'd send a patrol car to check the area, but in the meantime, I should stay inside and keep my doors locked. The next hour felt like an eternity. I sat on the couch, clutching my phone and a kitchen knife. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. The patrol car eventually came and went, but I didn't feel any safer. Around midnight, I decided to try to sleep. I figured if I stayed in my locked bedroom, I'd be fine. I was wrong. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound, a soft scraping, like metal against wood. It was coming from the window. My bedroom was on the second floor, so it didn't make sense. No one could be up there. But when I turned toward the window, my blood ran cold. Mike was there, his face pressed against the glass. His breath fogged the window as he stared at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. In his hand, he held a small pocket knife, dragging it slowly across the glass. I froze, unable to move or scream. He grinned, tapping the knife against the glass in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Somehow, I snapped out of it. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering to the operator that someone was trying to break into my house. As I spoke, Mike's expression changed. His grin faded, replaced by something darker. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, then turned and disappeared into the night. The police arrived within minutes, but by then, Mike was long gone. They searched the area and found footprints leading away from the house, but nothing else. I gave them all the details I could, but it didn't feel like enough. They assured me they'd patrol the neighborhood more frequently, but I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I contacted the delivery app to report what happened. They apologized profusely and promised to investigate, but I never found out what came of it. Mike's profile disappeared from the app, and I never saw him again. But the experience left me shaken. For weeks, I couldn't be home alone without checking every lock and window multiple times. Even now, I can't order delivery without feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I never really thought of myself as someone who'd have a story worth telling, but after what happened that one night when I was home alone, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Let me set the stage for you. It was a Friday night around mid-November, and my parents had left for the weekend to visit my aunt out of town. It was supposed to be a quiet couple of days for me. Just me, the couch, some pizza, and a binge watch of my favorite series. But life had other plans. I started the evening pretty chill. After waving my parents off, I ordered a large pepperoni pizza, because why not? I'm a grown-up when they're not around, right? The delivery guy showed up just as the sun was setting. I tipped him, shut the door, and plopped down on the couch. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. It must have been around 9:30 p.m. when the first thing happened. I was halfway through an episode of my show when I heard it, a faint tap 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 on the living room window. At first I brushed it off, probably the wind or a branch. But then it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. I muted the TV and stared at the window, my heart thudding in my chest. The curtains were drawn, so I couldn't see outside. It's nothing, I told myself, just the wind. But then, right as I was about to unmute the TV, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't on the window, it was on the back door. Now, I'm not one to panic easily, but something about that sound, that deliberate rhythm of the knocks, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and crept to the kitchen where the back door was. I turned on the porch light and peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the empty backyard. But here's the thing, the knocking didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else now. The front door. At this point, I was officially freaked out. I called out, "Who's there?" but got no response. Just silence. My gut told me not to open the door, so I didn't. Instead, I checked the locks on every door and window in the house, making sure everything was secure. Then, I went back to the living room, trying to convince myself it was just some prank. You know, kids messing around or something. But the next sound wasn't a knock, it was the creak of a floorboard. The noise came from upstairs, and let me tell you, my heart almost stopped. I hadn't been upstairs since my parents left. Nobody was supposed to be up there. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy candlestick, and started making my way up, step by step. The stairs creaked under my weight, and every sound felt deafening. When I reached the top, the hallway was dark. I'd left all the lights off earlier, but now one of the bedroom doors was open, the one at the very end of the hall. And I swear, I could hear breathing. I thought about calling the cops, but my phone was still downstairs on the couch. Great move, right? So, there I was, standing in the dark hallway, clutching a candlestick like some budget version of Clue, and trying to muster the courage to move. "Whoever's in there, you need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. No response. I took a step closer, and the floor creaked under me. That's when the breathing stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse. I pushed the door open wider, and for a moment, I thought the room was empty. But then I saw it. The closet door. It was slightly ajar, and there was a shadow inside. Now, I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I yanked the closet door open, and there he was. A man crouched inside, staring up at me with this wild look in his eyes. He was thin, scruffy, wearing dirty clothes, and he had this grin that made my stomach turn. Before I could react, he lunged at me. I swung the candlestick as hard as I could, catching him on the shoulder. He stumbled, but he didn't go down. Instead, he scrambled past me and bolted down the hallway. I chased him, adrenaline pumping, but by the time I got downstairs, he was already gone. The back door was wide open, swinging in the wind. I slammed it shut and locked it, my hands trembling. Then I called the police. When they arrived, they found signs of forced entry on one of the basement windows. Turns out, this guy had been living down there for who knows how long. They found a makeshift bed, empty food wrappers, and even some of my parents' things. The scariest part? There were notes, pages of scribbled plans about me, about the night he was going to make his move. I've moved on since that night, but I still get chills thinking about it, knowing he'd been watching me, listening, waiting, and the worst part, they never caught him. So now, every time I'm home alone, I double-check the locks, I check the basement, and I never ever ignore a strange sound. Let me tell you about the most disturbing night of my life. It's not something I like to revisit often, but maybe sharing it will help someone else out there. It's not about ghosts or the supernatural. It's about something far more real and far more terrifying. Here's what happened. It was a quiet Saturday night in late November. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of the house. I was 19 at the time, old enough to handle myself. But there's something about being alone in a big empty house that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. The house was a 2-story suburban home in a pretty safe neighborhood. It had all the usual comforts, a fenced backyard, good locks on the doors, and neighbors close enough to hear if something went wrong. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Around 9 p.m., I decided to settle in for the night. I made a bowl of popcorn, grabbed a soda, and started watching a movie in the living room. The house was dimly lit, with just the TV casting a soft glow across the room. It was cozy, almost too cozy. About an hour into the movie, I thought I heard something. A faint tapping sound, like fingers drumming on glass. I paused the movie and listened, but the sound stopped. Shrugging it off as my imagination, I hit play and tried to focus on the screen. 5 minutes later, the tapping came back. This time, it was louder and more distinct. It was coming from the window behind me. My heart started to race as I turned around, but all I could see was the reflection of the TV on the glass. It's probably nothing, I muttered to myself, trying to sound convincing. Maybe it was a branch or some kind of animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I grabbed my phone and walked over to the window, my footsteps feeling too loud in the silent room. Slowly, I pulled back the curtain and peered outside. There was no one there. I let out a shaky breath, trying to laugh at my own paranoia. Still, I double-checked the lock on the window before sitting back down. But by then, the cozy vibe was gone. Every creak of the house felt louder. Every shadow felt darker. I decided to text my best friend, Emma. Me? Hey, you up? Emma? Yeah, what's up? Me? I'm freaking myself out. Thought I heard someone tapping on my window. Emma? Ugh, creepy. You sure it wasn't a branch or something? Me? Yeah, probably. Just being paranoid. Emma? Keep your doors locked and don't go outside. Creeps come out at night. I laughed a little at her dramatic tone, but her advice wasn't wrong. I checked the locks on the front and back doors just to be safe. Everything was secure. Around 11 p.m., I was starting to feel a bit calmer. I decided to head upstairs to my room and call it a night. But as I was walking up the stairs, I heard it again. The tapping. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the living room window. It was coming from the sliding glass door in the kitchen. My stomach dropped. The kitchen was at the back of the house, and the sliding door opened onto the fenced backyard. No trees, no branches, no easy explanation. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't turn on any lights, hoping to stay hidden. When I reached the kitchen, I could see the outline of the sliding door. The tapping was steady now, deliberate. Someone was out there. I grabbed a knife from the counter, my hands trembling. Slowly, I inched toward the door and peeked through the curtain. There he was. A man stood on the other side of the glass, his face partially obscured by a hood. His hands were pressed against the door, and he was staring straight at me. My blood ran cold. He didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching. I backed away, my mind racing. Should I call the police? Should I try to scare him off? Before I could decide, he did something that made my blood freeze. He smiled. That smile was the stuff of nightmares. It wasn't a friendly smile or even a menacing grin. It was something worse, something wrong, like he knew something I didn't. He raised a hand and waved at me, slow and deliberate, as if we were old friends. I stumbled back and ran to the front door. My first thought was to get out of the house, but as I reached for the doorknob, a horrifying realization hit me. The man had been at the back door. If I opened the front door, what if he wasn't alone? What if someone was waiting for me outside? Instead, I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom and called 911. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline as I explained what was happening. She assured me that officers were on their way and told me to stay on the line. As I sat there, clutching the knife and listening to the distant sound of sirens, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps. They were inside the house. I don't know how long I sat there, holding my breath and praying the bathroom door would hold. The footsteps came closer, then stopped right outside the door. I could see the shadow of feet through the gap at the bottom. Whoever it was, they were just standing there. Then, they knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. "I know you're in there," a man's voice said, low and calm. "Why don't you come out?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had closed up. The silence stretched on, and then the footsteps retreated. Moments later, I heard the sound of a door opening and then slamming shut. The police arrived soon after. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but found no sign of the man. The back door had been unlocked, though I knew for a fact I'd locked it earlier. To this day, I don't know who he was or how he got in. The police said it was probably an attempted burglary, but I'm not so sure. Burglars don't usually stand outside your door, watching, waiting. And they definitely don't smile like that. Now, every time I'm home alone, I can't help but think about that night. The tapping, the footsteps, the smile, and I always make sure to double-check the locks.